Welcome to the College Recruiter webinar series. The subject of today's discussion will be on building diversity and inclusion to support the Americans with Disabilities Act 25th anniversary, recruitment, retention, and stakeholder engagement in the digital age. My name is Andrea McEwen Henderson, and I will be your host today. I am one of the national account managers with College Recruiter. I have a dozen years of experience in helping large and small employers reach recent college graduates and students. My primary responsibilities are facilitating our webinars, moderating the discussions at our college recruiting bootcamp conferences, as well as working with small to mid-sized employers on their entry-level hiring needs. College Recruiter is the highest traffic college job board with 150,000 unique monthly visitors. We help employers reach recent college graduates and students of 1, 2, and 4-year colleges and graduate schools. We have permission to deliver emails on behalf of our employer clients to 7 million recent graduates and 10 million students, and can also target them by major, school, year of graduation, diversity, and more. Our other solutions for employers include job postings, targeted mobile banner ads, targeted display ads, virtual career fairs, and custom research projects. For more information about College Recruiter, you can reach us at www.collegerecruiter.com or 952-848-2211. The month of July 2015 marks the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or known as ADA, which was truly a landmark piece of legislation that fundamentally redefined how people with disabilities live in American society. One of the cornerstones of this legislation was the impact on employment across all sectors. Today's guests are John Presentes, Area Vice President of HODIS, a division of Finely Talent LLC, and Professor Jonathan Kaufman, CEO of J. Kaufman Consulting. John Presentes brings over 20 years of expertise and specialization in diversity recruitment and outreach. He advises his clients on the latest recruitment solutions and advertising campaign strategies, evangelizing digital grassroots outreach, social media, and mobile recruitment, which is based in communication solutions that are employer branding. Jonathan Kaufman is a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College and Oxford University with an emphasis on disability, lifestyle, work, and policy issues. Professor Kaufman is seen as one of the most innovative thinkers in both the diversity and disability arena. I'll now turn the webinar over to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity, and it's wonderful to have Professor Kaufman join us. We're old friends. So a few months ago, we had the opportunity to chat really about what's new in online engagement. Digital strategy and recruitment seems to be top of mind with a lot of folks today, especially in regards to employee engagement. And we obviously, in our dialogue, had really looked at some of the key issues, because when we start talking about diversity, the fact is, in terms of the ramifications of how we address persons with targeted disabilities, both for the private and public sector, we've seen so much happening in terms of veterans, recruitment, and reintegration. And at the same token, we need to address in both the public and private sector, what are those myths that we can dispel in terms of fears of adverse impact. In fact, just recently, California State Auditor put out a report that I found very troubling, in that it is pointing to the fact that many of California's public-facing websites are not 508 compliant or in line with WC3. So we're going to be talking about many of these issues today, not only as it touches on diversity, but we're excited to hear your thoughts and questions. And really the objective for us today was to share a little bit more about building that business case. So when we really look at that business case, one of the things that Professor Kaufman had shared with me when we were talking about the idea of get to 7% of our hiring needs to be for those folks that are differently abled. But with that ruling that came out in the 2014 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that went into effect last summer, that has not only helped galvanize for veterans job training and job development, but we're seeing a number of new initiatives coming out of the White House and the Department of Labor. and I think this might be a good opportunity just to maybe have Jonathan speak a little bit to the points about our recent college grads, given the opportunity to reach them not only through College Recruiter but through more emerging digital marketing platforms, uh, building talent communities, and really looking at stakeholder engagement, not only across your own organization, but really across the public, private, and a number of other sectors.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, John. I want to sort of begin by saying that persons with disabilities are early adopters of technology for a variety of reasons. Those with physical disabilities, those with cognitive disabilities. Technology has been sort of this great panacea, which has been enabled persons with disabilities to do a variety of things and engage in society. And when you have sort of young millennials that are coming out of college, and as you can see from this mind map here, 12 to 15% of all college graduates are diagnosed with some form of disability, and for the most part, learning disabilities. And when we look at what's called the DSM-4 or DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is sort of, I guess, the Bible for those in mental health, what we see is the broadening definition of disability, and it has sort of changed the way we think about working with those with disabilities, and particularly within the employment market, thinking about, okay, if these are the numbers or around the numbers, we as an organization have to think about, okay, we not only want to recruit and retain the best and the brightest, but how do we create an environment so that they can do their best work? And that, for me, is very critical when you think about the ADA itself. The ADA, obviously, as we talked about, is celebrating its 25th anniversary, but I want people to understand and not see it as a piece of a piece of legislation that's designed for litigation, but rather a template that can be utilized and leveraged as a value add for your organization. That's the key that I hope to get across today.
So, Dr. Kaufman, when we look at, the opportunity not only to do and leverage technology, not only for on-campus visits and events, but nowadays virtual. I know many years ago, we were kicking around the ideas of virtual events for people with targeted disabilities because some of the big barriers were mobility and transportation.
Right.
And I think certainly today, there's plenty of wonderful campuses out there here locally. For me at Gallaudet, I know you've done some work at Landmark College. Programs like Best Buddies that are out there now and nonprofits. Maybe if you could speak a little bit more to what, a few takeaways in terms of working with those colleges that have programs for students with learning disabilities.
Well, let me take a step back. Every university and college in the United States has an office for persons with disabilities, particularly an office for students with disabilities. So if you're looking at literally the hundreds of colleges and potentially thousands of colleges across the United States, most of them have an office for students with disabilities. There are particular colleges, as John mentioned, that are designed specifically for young adults who have learning disabilities, and more recently they've sort of transitioned into young adults that are on the autism spectrum because of the nature of the diagnosis and the sort of the fact that 1 out of 66 children are now being diagnosed with autism, and this is really the first generation of those on the spectrum that are entering the workforce, and particularly in a large number of them are entering sort of the STEM fields. But it's critically important to understand that most colleges have these offices so that there are programs that are designed specifically for this targeted group. And as recruiters go out and say, you know what, we want to look for this type of student, or if we find a student who's wonderful and has sort of, a great background, but happens to have a learning disability or happens to have another type of disability, these are resources where one can go at literally every university, and say, we need a particular area that we can go and know that we're finding students that also have been vetted, which is also important.
Good point. And I think when we talk about vetting and we talk about resources that are available, both not only in the private sector, but even in public sector, obviously the Department of Labor, Office of Disability Employment Policy, and what they've been doing with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, not only programs like the National Collaborative on Workforce on Disabilities for Youth, they're looking at these issues. There's a lot of really rich resources there. And certainly to our colleagues or our folks in the public sector, I think back to folks like Diana Cohen within DoD in providing accessibility hardware. Having her speak to a room full of senior level executives and literally yelling, "What is wrong? What is the problem? We're giving you this hardware for free. Why aren't you doing it?" I think we've seen now trending, obviously coming in with former Secretary at the Office of Personnel Management, John Barry, and working with Christine Griffin, who came over from EEOC for the Leadership for Employment of Americans with Disabilities. We've seen some really great work that's been done in using Schedule A. And although OPM has been kind of thrown around in the media a bit lately given cybersecurity issues, I think there's huge opportunities to leverage this talent pool, not only to address those mission critical areas, but even in aligning maybe some of that outreach and approach to things like what JP Morgan is doing with the National Disability Institute in creating, if you will, opportunities for veterans. We talk about the Syracuse University Veterans Institute. They're one of many. And what I would encourage, those folks both in the public or private sectors, take a look at and think of it as not only your destination, but what are those drivers and how can we build engagement? And, when we look at, there are certainly tools out there. You can go to the WC3 mobile checker. You can drop in your URL there to take a look. There's certainly the same can be done for your website. But ultimately, when we look at the opportunities ahead of us as they speak to really not only addressing some of the trends we're seeing, but I think anytime you look at an employer branding or stakeholder engagement strategy, you have to keep in mind that the benefit for those applicants and for that candidate pool is going to be twofold. In the work that you've done in terms of accessibility and some of the consulting work that you've done, maybe you could share a little bit more about some of the organizations you might have worked with in the past to kind of educate their employee resource groups.
Yeah, one of the obviously the largest organization I ever worked with. There were two. One in the private sector was Walmart, which is the largest private employer in the country. And I was sort of brought in to not only educate their ERG groups, but really develop a disability strategy for hiring. And, we sort of looked at it in different silos. I always tell my students and my clients, look, the disability community is unique because it is the essence of diversity. It's the only minority group anyone can join at any time. And as we age, the likelihood is there. People want to continue to work longer. So it isn't just about recruiting from a college standpoint, it's also through the lifespan. And that's something is critically important. That's why I think it's so vital to look at hiring and recruiting young talent who have disabilities so that organizations are cognizant of what their needs are going forward. And then, so what I used to do, when I was working at places like Walmart, was let's look at the sort of long-term strategy of how do you think about the lifespan of an employee? And what does an employer need to do to leverage that talent, cultivate that talent, and most importantly, create value long term? And then on the other side of it, obviously, look, they their business is to sell product, is to find opportunities where they can see the talent itself as consumers, and what type of consumer products will this community bring. I mean, I must say, the global disability community has now exceeded, the population has exceeded the size of China, with a purchasing power of over $8 trillion. So these are numbers that are astounding, and that is the reality. So we have to see the up-and-coming community of young college students coming out as a valuable resource.
Absolutely, and I think that dovetails down, and there are lessons learned that I've found in working with organizations like the VA and CDC and the public health facing communities. They're very aware of the physical space accessibility. There's plenty of wonderful onboarding tools. I think when we look at building that comfort level, we talk about internships, and really that path to full-time equivalency status is a great way to change culture and develop a comfort level within that workforce, so that as we develop a disability confidence, if you will, in terms of really reaching out and messaging to this audience, I think it's, to your point, when we look at the actual dollars, the business case certainly is there. So when I think our role really as practitioners is to kind of get you out of that comfort, your comfort level, and in speaking to the C-suite, when we're looking at an $8 trillion market, whether you're a Walmart, a Major League Baseball, whether you're doing work, at IRS, or really to address some of our mission-critical occupations, I think that not only do we have to think about that issue as it relates to the entry level and recent college grads and our veterans, but also to the mature market.
Mm-hmm.
I think you had shared a statistic which I found very surprising. 70% of AARP's constituency is going to be dealing with disabilities in their lifetime. Yeah. And that represents, I think, a wonderful way to not only engage and attract talent to your talent community, but at the end of the day can speak volumes in terms of building a common cause effort, and really laying down a framework and a strategy, a talent acquisition strategy for this unique audience.
Yeah, I also want to add something and sort of go backwards a little bit in terms of thinking about college students that are coming out of university, that are graduating now, and look at STEM. And the reality is that a large number of companies, and brand name companies like Google, like Facebook, like Twitter, are going to be hiring young college graduates who doing STEM work who happen to be on the autism spectrum. The fact is, when I spoke to the provost of MIT at one point, he said to me, look, 60% of our student body is somewhere on the spectrum. And Caltech is fairly similar, and Carnegie Mellon is fairly similar. And if you go to any college or university, you're going to find that that has become the new normal. And because it's become the new norm, many tech companies, whether they're sort of, the Googles of the world, or even pharmaceutical companies who are in that space, have to understand that we are going to be hiring really great people, yet at the same time have very particular challenges and very particular ways of living and ways of seeing the world through the lens of autism. And it's important to understand is it's not that they don't want to work, but it's how to leverage their ability to be at the best level they can be, which is sometimes unorthodox ways of working, which actually bode well with this type of field anyways. And I think that we have to, as recruiters, have to be cognizant of this.
Indeed, and I think it also it begins with awareness and engagement, and certainly kind of laying down doing the research up front. And by no means, for those on the call, these are just a small group of the associations. Some of our favorites, but there are certainly a myriad of them that can help you in terms of articulating not only a thematic approach, but the tactics to support your strategy. Um, and so with that, we're excited to hopefully hear your questions and to address some questions. We want to keep this fairly interactive, and so we'll be adding content, or we'll be adding your questions here in response onto this mind map, but we'd like to really kind of hear your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Andrea, and she's going to kind of walk us through a little bit more of your questions today.
Thank you so much, John and Professor Kaufman. Just great, and we certainly could have gone on forever. But we do have some questions, so I'm going to jump right in with the first one. The first person said, "I'm a combat wounded military veteran and having a hard time finding an internship. My career service office doesn't seem to know how to help me. They're nice, but don't have experience helping disabled vets. I have so much to give. Where can I find employers who want to hire people like me?"
There are several places, and one of the places that we sort of looked at was Syracuse University. They have an entrepreneurial boot camp for disabled veterans, but it's called EBV. But the Syracuse Institute for Veterans is a wonderful way. And then there's also an organization here in New York City where I live called Warriors on Wall Street. But my personal choice would be to go to Syracuse, and everything is online. They have phone numbers, they have email addresses, and they're just wonderful. And it's run by veterans. So that would be my suggestion.
Well, and to add to that, I know, like, for instance, the American Advantage Foundation, which Jeff Sterling has formed, is very focused in that entrepreneurial type of training. And I think for our veterans, we don't want to necessarily refer to our men and women who have really kind of put their lives on the line. They bring soft skills, and they are really a trusted workforce asset. I think we undervalue them by calling them internships. And so I think VA, for instance, has really turned to the term fellowships. There are certainly vaforvets.va.gov is a great resource for employment opportunities, not only from the private sector that wish to kind of look at what's called the VEX program, the Veterans Employment Coordinating Service. VA's Benefits Administration has been doing some great work there as well. And I would add, take a look at sites like My Career at VA. There's interactive career pathing tools there. ONET is another one that comes out of the Department of Labor, where you can look at military skills translators. I think even Employers Direct has military skills translators. And so those types of services and support can help any veteran that is looking to secure gainful employment. But I applaud the initiative to develop your career skills, and I think there are plenty of great resources out there to do that. And we'll be happy to provide you a list or links to many of those types of websites following the call.
Absolutely.
Great, great. Now the next question is, the person asks, they heard the government is required to hire people with disabilities. They're a human resource specialist with a federal government agency, but just started, and they don't know much about this area. How can they learn more about it?
Oh, well, I'd love to answer that. And I think, one thing is I would look at Schedule A hiring within the Office of Personnel Management, and leveraging for anybody in HR that is looking at, how to, not only from a practitioner standpoint, how do I recruit that talent? There is what we call direct hiring authority. And so just as you had developed or had come into the federal sector as an HR professional, you can also leverage the fact that we are, if you will, HR is a mission critical occupation, as well as cybersecurity, as well as certainly many of the STEM fields, procurement. So I think there's a lot of opportunity from a career mobility standpoint within the public sector. There are certainly, take a look at the HR Academy for your own, your own edification, and where there's shared learning that's going on, and that is also, I think, another great resource for you to identify opportunities and agencies to advance in the what we call the GS levels, moving to an SES or human capital classification. These are some of the areas that I think have real needs in the HR community within the public sector.
Great. And we have time for one more. And this last question is related to employees who long after hire develop a disability. So how can you be sure that you are not being too invasive in employee privacy while balancing the needs of the position and retention of these employees?
I think it begins with reducing the stigma that's associated with and it gets back to one of the earlier points we talked about. Why haven't we seen change happen fast enough? It's that sense of adverse impact. And for anybody that's looking at kind of engaging not only your employee resource groups, but really, building that awareness not only through your training, but that aging and disability, these are issues that are linked inextricably. And as we are moving now to the way we work is very different, and we always want to consider the full candidate life cycle. So whether we're looking at bringing in interns to change that culture, converting those interns, I have to say the Internal Revenue Service, if I recall, had something like a 54% conversion rate on their interns, which is very good. You want to ultimately, establish a disability council within your organization, and really draw on the experience not only to support from other organizations, but kind of take stock of your situation before you kind of implement a disability strategy, so that you're couching it or framing it maybe in line to support your employer value proposition, some of your branding. Maybe it has to do with creating content around your social media. But I think that it's the one, as Jonathan said, and I'll kind of share this again, I think it speaks to this, it is the one protected class that any of us can join at any time. And I can't think of a better activity, especially in July, for employee resource groups to have this discussion. So with that, we're always happy to follow up and provide more insights in terms of, building a talent community, engaging with your events, leveraging make it easy for folks to opt in, to share, to support these types of initiatives, because we're seeing this quite a bit in terms of resiliency and wellness initiatives. And so the short answer is look to your resiliency and look to your wellness programs. There's organizations like Omada Health now who are really gamifying the wellness and fitness. I personally have lost a lot of weight using fitness apps. So if we remove that stigma and make it easy to have that conversation with HR, I think I used to say in HR you have to be both a doctor and a lawyer. I think today we can add data analyst to that. But I think that between working with your employee resource group heads and your brand ambassadors to kind of share that messaging and make it creating an inclusive culture, you'll find much success in that regards.
Thank you again, John and Professor Kaufman, for joining us, and thank you for attending this College Recruiter webinar. The subject of today's discussion was Building Diversity and Inclusion to Support the Americans with Disabilities Act 25th Anniversary, Recruitment, Retention, and Stakeholder Engagement in the Digital Age. My name is Andrea McEwen Henderson, and I was your host today. I am one of the National Account Managers with College Recruiter. I have a dozen years of experience in helping large and small employers reach recent college graduates and students. My primary responsibilities are facilitating our webinars, moderating the discussions at our college recruiting bootcamp conferences, as well as working with small to mid-sized employers on their entry-level hiring needs. College Recruiter is the highest traffic college job board with 150,000 unique monthly visitors. We help employers reach recent graduates and students of 1, 2, and 4-year colleges and graduate schools. We have permission to deliver emails on behalf of our employer clients to 7 million recent graduates and 10 million students. We can also target them by major, school, year of graduation, diversity, and more. Other solutions for employers include job postings, targeted mobile banner ads, targeted display ads, virtual career fairs, and custom research projects. For more information about College Recruiter, you can reach us at www.collegerecruiter.com/contact or 952-848-2211. Today's guests were John Persenes, Area Vice President of POTUS, a division of Finally Talent, and Professor Jonathan Kaufman, CEO of J. Kaufman Consulting. Thank you for joining us today.